Coming down with the heartache.
On this episode of Between Two Beers, we talk to Danny Hay. Danny is the All Whites coach and probably the most powerful man in New Zealand football. But before he was a coach, he was a player, and a bloody good one. He played for Waitakere City, Central United, Perth Glory, Leeds, Warsaw, the Football Kings, the New Zealand Knights, and was All Whites captain. He has coached at 2 Under-17 World Cups and in 2019 led Eastern Suburbs to their first national title in 48 years and was soon after named All Whites coach. In this episode, we talk about his time at Leeds, where he played with Rio Ferdinand, Harry Kewell, Mark Viduka, Jonathan Woodgate, amongst others, how he made his Champions League debut against Barcelona at the Nou Camp in front of 90,000 people, playing against Man United at Old Trafford and why Ole Gunnar Solskjaer is the smartest player he's ever seen, and the 9 groin operations across 3 seasons that killed his dreams of playing at the top level. We also talk about the highs and lows of his All Whites career, marking Brazilian Ronaldo, why he retired twice, and that All Whites tour to Venezuela. In the second half, we talk about coaching, his philosophies, influences, and what makes him different as an All Whites coach, and what the next 12 months might look like. This was a fun one to do, and we loved how open and accessible Danny was. Long may it continue. If you like what we're doing at Between Two Beers, check out our website at betweentwobeers.com and consider supporting the cause on our Patreon link for the cost of a cup of coffee a month. Or, if you'd like to be our major sponsor, there's an opening there too. Get in touch. Thanks for tuning in.
Coming down with the heartache.
Danny Hay, welcome to Between Two Beers.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Excited to have you. Well, you are having us actually. We're in Danny's home in St Heliers, and it is a beautiful spot. One of the perks of this job, Shay, is that we get invited into guests' homes, and this is one of the nicer ones we've been in. We are sitting at a table underneath a sign. No, is it signed? Not signed. A framed Ronaldo 9 shirt from when you played against him for the All Whites in 2006. In the study, and yeah, it's set up for a goodie, Shay.
Yeah, like Leeds shirt over the back there as well. It's it's a proper football home. So thank you very much for having us.
No, you're welcome, guys. It's a little bit like MTV Cribs, eh? Back in the day.
It is, just without the video. Yeah. Right. Well, we started. Shay, how do you know Danny?
Well, obviously was a fan. Watched you play for the national team, but I think probably my first real interaction with Danny was 2007 in Fiji. OFC Champions League final. Waitakere United were playing Bar. They just lost 2-1 in the first leg. And I can't remember what it was over, but Danny was upset or riled up about something, and I copped the brunt of it outside the changing rooms before Waitakere got into the team bus. 25-year-old me, I think I might have handled it okay. I'm not too sure.
It is actually one of those things I can remember.
Oh, really?
I can actually, I can remember that one actually quite vividly. I remember, I believe it was Alan Pearce went right down to the byline, cut a ball back, so cut it back, and I can't remember, it may have been Daniel Koprovich or somebody's gone and put it in, and the Lino's given it as that happened in the islands back in the day. You know, well, I think we got a little bit of a rough deal, and I think just the emotions got the better. Anybody in the vicinity who was going to cop a little bit of a serve. So I've probably got to apologise for that.
No, you're all right.
Imagine that, a young fella had nothing to do with it.
Yeah, how did you handle yourself as a 24-year-old sort of?
I don't know. I think I put my best kind of diplomatic hat on, and look, I can't control the events that happen on the field. I understand your frustration. Trot out those standard political lines, and I guess thankfully, second leg, the game came back. You ended up winning that, but I have to actually apologise to you. I don't know if you recall this or if you even saw it, but a few weeks back I was on Danny and Drake's stag do. And you might have got a phone call from Mario Ilic.
Yes.
And you didn't pick up, thankfully.
Yeah.
Just without hijacking it, start of the day, everyone had to write something down about what Danny had to do on the stag. I wrote down, has to ring Danny Hay and say why he should be the All Whites number 1. And then it turned around, basically everything went in a hat and they said, whatever you've written down, you've got to do at some point during the night. and I shit myself. And I got to about 8 o'clock, and I thought I got away with it here. And then someone said, "You got a phone call to make," and I'd lost my phone, thankfully. But Illich,
It was Murray. Well, actually, I knew that it was Danyan's stag do, and I knew all the boys were getting together. So I think I was sitting with. I think we were down in Cambridge for an RTC. So I was sitting with Martin Bullock and Darren Baisley, and we went. Here we go.
Yeah.
Here we go. We know what's going on here. I should have actually answered it.
I had everything
It would
ready.
have been fun.
It didn't go to voicemail. I had everything ready, and yeah, thankfully. So apologies for interrupting your evening, but look, that's enough of me and Danny. Steve, Danny Hay, first time to meet.
Yes, first time I believe we've actually spoken. I think I might have played against you in 2008. I was playing for Waikato OFC under Roger Wilkinson. You were in, and I wanted to check this with you because my recollection of that Waitakere backline is one of the great backlines in National League history. You and Embers, Baisley, and Jonathan Perry.
And John Perry, yeah.
What a back four.
Yeah, and I think when Bays and John Perry were fighting it out for the right back position, so we had
That's some scrap,
Yeah,
by
we
the
had Sykesy at left back as well. So it was, and then we had a midfield of Chris Bale. I remember Benji Tatori was up front with Alan Pearce, Commons Manapi. We even had Roy Krishna as well. That he may have come the year afterwards. But man, you look back for a National League side, it was up there with one of the stronger sides. But the Auckland City side of that time was incredible as well. They had real quality. But yeah, good times. I do remember playing against Big Rog in the Waikato team a couple of times, but. Potentially, I could have been injured, which was a big part of my career when we played each other. So we may not have got on the field at the same time.
Yeah, I do remember that Shay talks about being intimidated by you in the islands. There certainly was an intimidation factor with you as a defender, as a striker. Thinking about playing against you or playing against you, it was fucking hell, Danny Hay, he's going to fucking kick me up in the air. So yeah, that was my recollection of you. Now, obviously, as a Whites coach, you're wearing a different hat, and I'm excited to get into all of that tonight. But we actually thought we'll start talking about you as a player. And as we tend to do on Between Two Beers, we've canvassed a few of your former teammates and friends. So I'm going to read out what Jeremy Christie has had to say about you.
Former guest as well.
Yeah. Former guest, friend of the show.
And top man.
Top man. He says, I got to play with Danny at the Kings, then the national team, then the Knights. He was a top player and an angry man. A regular fun dude off the field, but on the field he was an absolute beast. Even at training, he was very demanding. It was the first time I'd seen someone like that, and Ryan Nelson and Winston Reid were the same. Very humble off the field, but ruthless on it. So the first question is, where did that aggression come from?
Yeah, good question. I think probably my mother. The apple never falls far from the tree, and she was, and same with my dad, but I think really look at my mum, she was super competitive. So played basketball for New Zealand, so played at a good level, very athletic, very, very, very competitive. Unfortunately, I think my daughter's probably got the same genes. It seems to have not gone to my son, but straight to my daughter. And, if you sort of roll out 10 bowls of ice cream, she's eyeing up every single one to make sure she gets the biggest. So, yeah, that sort of competitive nature, I think it, for better or for worse, it sort of was part of everything in my life.
We talk about competitiveness, and I mean, Jeremy used the word angry. Were you one of these guys that when you stepped on the training field or on the field, you kind of transformed into someone that when you stepped off the field, you weren't?
Yeah, look, I think Jezza probably, like you said, his first interaction with me was when I'd come back from England, and you learn what professional football is about when you're playing at that level. You really get driven into what the standards are, and you could never ever turn up to training anything less than being at 100%. And this is no word of a lie, but I can remember turning up to Leeds trainings being nervous, driving there being nervous, because you knew if you weren't going to be at your best and if you didn't have the right mentality, the right approach, that you're going to get embarrassed, like seriously embarrassed, because you come up against world-class players. And so I think that sort of approach to training and the standards required just, were sort of driven into me through my time at Leeds, and then that evolved, like I said, through the entire time in England. So, unfortunately for those young players that, sort of got to work with me, play with me when I was back here, it was probably a little bit of a shock to the system, because the Kiwi player really, without being harsh, we're sort of on the moon here in terms of, I guess, the football hotbeds of the world. So we grow up with a real false sense of where we're at, and a false sense of the standards required to compete on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis at that true professional level.
Oh, I'm going to get to Leeds very soon, but help paint a picture of Danny Hay as a player. What were your strengths? What were your weaknesses?
Yeah, shit, that's a tough one. Look, I think the competitive nature, the drive to want to win, to want to do well, to not let myself down, was a big one. Look, I certainly wasn't technically the best player out there. I felt as a defender I was fairly comfortable on the ball. I wasn't a panic merchant when it came to me, which, back in those days it was a different type of game to what we see nowadays, and you generally weren't encouraged to play. But I think that was something, in general that I wanted to do. But like I said, certainly, I made the most of whatever ability I had, and tried to work on that as hard as I possibly could. And, I had Ryan Nelson talk to the All Whites in the lockdown last year. And I remember him talking about it, the fact that even when he was at Blackburn, he was constantly thinking, shit, I'm a bit of a fraud here. When are people going to work out that I'm actually not that good? And so I think that sort of
Imposter syndrome.
That dealt in your own mind. And I can remember having the same thing throughout your whole career. It didn't matter what level you're playing at. I think drives you to constantly want to improve, want to be better, to train harder, to really push yourself. And I think, that's something that even to this day, sort of 6 mornings a week when you get up early and go to the gym, you still sort of have that. You don't lose that. And I think that's just a big part of my makeup.
When we get guests on, we tend to go down rabbit holes and research. And over the last 48 hours, I have watched a lot of Leeds videos. There's some great documentaries about the great Champions League adventure and that season. So we're going to get to that. I want you to paint a bit of a picture. We're going to skip to that part of your career. So talk us through how you went from Perth to Leeds and what Leeds were like as a club when you joined.
Yeah, look, that was obviously a phenomenal time in my life, but had two really wonderful seasons in Perth Glory, and I'm thankful that that was the club that came in for me and I decided to go to. Not I met my wife there, so that's probably a big factor, but it was a great club and great grounding to make that move over to the UK eventually. But look, the way it worked out, I'd actually had a week's trial in Stuttgart in Germany, and not many people would know that. So went there, got offered a contract. As I flew back into Perth, I think there was no mobile phones, there was no texting back in those days, no social media. The old phone rang, and it was an agent from England that I'd never come across, hadn't spoken to, and he just said, look, Leeds United are really interested in taking you over for 3 weeks for pre-season to have a good look at you. And so I had to make a decision pretty quickly whether I took the contract with Stuttgart or gambled and went to Leeds. And having spoken to a few people, and actually these agents that had contacted me were via John Adsett. So funny enough, just how these sort of sliding door moments. John Adsett was living in Perth at the time, recovering from cancer, and had sent over a couple of games of me playing for the Glory to these agents, the Darcys in England, and that's how the sort of Leeds contact came about. But yeah, so
Keith Darcy.
Yes. Yeah,
Wow,
the agent.
Yeah.
Match agent.
Yeah.
Yeah. So small world, eh? Like how it works.
So what were Leeds like at this time? They were like a top 5.
So they
Premier
had
League team?
just finished, I believe it was 4th or 5th in the Premier League. So that was why. And to be honest, maybe a little bit of laziness on my part. I was like, learn new language or go over where you... And look, you know, even back then, not as easy as it is nowadays, but I did a little bit of research and you knew that there were a lot of good young players. They'd won the FA Youth Cup and the likes of Harry Kuehl. And,
Was that Anzac contingent already there? Like Kuehl and-
just Kuehl.
Right.
Just
Oh,
Kuehl.
right. So Viduka hadn't arrived.
So Viduka hadn't come there. So yes, it had the 3 weeks pre-season, and this is a little bit of a beaut, but honestly, I called she wasn't my wife at the time, but I called my girlfriend and back in Perth after day one. So it was the very, very first day of pre-season training. And you've got to remember, so I've come off the back of a Perth Glory season. I'm thinking I'm pretty fit, I'm in good shape.
And how old are you?
24.
Yeah.
Feeling good about myself. And rolled in there thinking it's their very first day of pre-season. This is going to be a doddle. And my life, like the running and the level of fitness these guys rolled in at first day of pre-season just blew my mind. So I remember they did these 8 long runs around this big park in Leeds, Roundhay Park, a bit like a Central Park, a huge big area. So there were 8 runs, you did a little bit of work in between. And after the third one, Eddie Gray, the legend, club legend of Leeds, just looked at me and went, big man. Just walked back to the beginning. I was so far behind. I think I was rolling in as they were just about to start the 4th one. And so
Really?
basically just had to put the tail between my legs, walk back to where everybody had sort of...
And had you been considered quite a fit player at Perth?
Yeah, like I thought I was in good shape. Like I'd been player of the season there. I was thinking I was on top of the world, fit. Like we said, just hadn't long finished the season, so I was feeling like I was in a great space. And so it was that for me was just a massive rude awakening to the difference in the level required.
And does anyone know who you are at this stage in the Leeds squad? Are they
No, they wouldn't have a clue. They wouldn't have a clue. So. Yes.
David Hay and calling you all sorts of different...
Yeah, 100%. I did get called David Hay in a program in Sweden when we got over there, because they didn't know. But yeah, I don't know if it would happen nowadays, but they took me with the first team to Sweden for 2 weeks after that. So thankfully that whole debacle of my lack of fitness wasn't seen by David O'Leary, the manager at the time. He came a week later and met us in Sweden. But I can remember hopping on the plane, so... 24, still fairly young, had just watched all these guys on TV, really some big names, David Batty, Nigel Martin and co. And so I remember just getting my ticket and sitting down in my seat, and David Batty sat next to me, Nigel Martin sat on the other seat, and it was just like, there's, so 2 England internationals, 2 huge names in the game, and you just sort of, but actually once you start talking to these guys, they're just, like David Batty was the most grounded, humble, down-to-earth human being you could ever come across, just a proper Yorkshireman. Nothing flash, didn't wear the flash gear, didn't buy flash cars, kept everything super simple, but was quite intimidating to start with. Really, really was, until you sort of get to know them, you recognise that they're just normal blokes.
Yeah, so how long did it take you to feel comfortable on the training field, or to think that that was your level, you could mix it with them? Yeah,
look, like I probably said at the beginning, you never took that for granted, because if you turned up with anything other than your mentality totally switched on, you would get embarrassed. So it was always a real challenge. But look, in terms of the training, once you get used to the pace of the game and the standard required, that becomes your level, and you sort of don't know any different. But that's how it essentially worked out. Was went to Sweden, ended up doing quite well in the games. David O'Leary, so I can remember just prior to the last sort of game in Sweden, the pre-season tour, took me out on the pitch, put his arm around me and said, we want to sign you. And I just went, okay, no problems. We don't have much money, we're not a big club, I don't care, just get me here.
And what was the deal?
Yeah, it was a three-year deal. And I can remember flew back to Perth afterwards, and that was, you just look and it was so sort of airy-fairy. It was was get back there, get yourself organised, fly back, and we'll sign the deal when you're back. Well, hang on. So I'm leaving my Perth contract just to fly back, and so I had to basically trust them. And sure enough, there was people at the airport and picked us up and took straight away, dropped stuff at the hotel, and then went in and signed the contract. But it was a little bit of you're taking a little bit of a leap of faith, and you're thinking, is this real, or is somebody playing a bit of a prank on me? It'd be a bloody good prank.
So it is real. You move back, 3-year contract, sort yourself out with had you buy a house? Do you rent?
Yeah, so they put us up in a really nice hotel, Alton Hall, for the first, I think it was 3 months. And that sort of wears thin after a while, living in the hotel room. But you bought an apartment right in the city centre, and life just became our life. I do recall though. So Di and I, we got married prior to heading out to Leeds, and it was, having you sort of get out there. She hadn't lived in Leeds before, and I can remember even when we first got picked up that first day we arrived. We're driving along the motorway, and I can remember her looking at the housing,
terraced houses and that sort of stuff,
grim and dark it was, and she's like,
it's a bit of a world away from Perth, I imagine.
Yeah, she's like, do we live in? Is that what we're going to live in? And I was like, I don't know at this stage. It was a little bit, but yeah, it was tough. It was tough for her initially. I think she struggled for probably the first sort of 3-4 months, and then actually just went, right, I want to get a job so I can get out and meet people and be active, and then once she was settled, and probably it's not just football but in any walk of life, if your wife, your partner is settled, then it just makes things so much easier, and you can sort of get on doing what you're doing. Because those first few months when they were trying to get me up to the level in terms of speed of training, the fitness levels required, they were just smashing me. I was getting absolutely hammered. I can remember just literally crawling into the hotel room at the end of each day, and Di sort of sitting there sort of on the edge of the bed. Right, he's home. All right, let's go do something now. But I was in no state to. So it was, a newly married couple. It wasn't easy. It wasn't easy to start with, but you sort of work your way through it.
The centre backs you were competing against.
I was going to say, your contemporaries.
Are we talking Woodgate, Rio Ferdinand?
Yeah, so
Jonathan Woodgate?
So when I first got there, it was
the Chief, wasn't it? Was he there?
The Chief, Lucas Radibi. Yeah, so he was the man. Woody was quite established, even though he was really young player. Michael Dewberry got signed the same time as me. Trying to think who else was there. There were a couple of other guys like Robert Molinar, who was an established player, but he was getting moved on, and he went to Bradford. And then after that first season, when we went into the Champions League, that was when they signed Rio partway through the season. For big money. So, you could look at it two ways. Yeah, it was, you're right down the pecking order, or the way I looked at it was an opportunity to test yourself against, arguably some of the best central defenders in the world. Unfortunately, my body didn't let me really test myself as much as I would have liked. I was probably, if I looked at it, I was probably on the physio's table near enough to 2 out of the 3 seasons I was there.
Yeah, so you played four games across the 3 years.
Yeah.
Injuries, was it always the same thing? Was it always the groin?
Yes, I had 8 groin ops when I was there. And look, nowadays they would never operate. Well, I'd suspect they would never operate. And, I've had surgeons and our top doctors back in this country go, no, you'd never do that. But you trusted, the environment you were in, you trusted the doctors, you trusted the physios, the surgeons, the experts there. But it was a different time to what it is nowadays, and a different world. And I don't think about, you talk about signing Rio Ferdinand for £18 million, which was a British transfer record at the time, and we had 1 physio.
Wow.
1 physio. No permanent doctor there. It was a bizarre time, because it was that time that the game in England was starting to be transformed from being the old school sort of mentality where it was, drinking a lot of booze and not being that professional, to, European players starting to come through, European coaches and their mentality and how they approach things just being very different. So by the time I left, we had a team of physios, but to start with, it was pretty Mickey Mouse, if I'm being honest, for a club of that size and stature.
Yeah, so what's the mental space like? You've signed Rio Ferdinand for 18 million. You've, say, on your fifth op, you're thinking, well, what the fuck's going on here? Like, how are you mentally dealing with that?
Yeah, well, that's maybe why Jez has said I'm an angry man. It's that's tough. And that's where I feel for players now that, like what Winston's gone through over the last few years, where you're constantly having a setback, you're getting yourself back, and then you're breaking down again, and it's, if anything, it's not the physical toll it takes on your body, it's the mental side, and because the only thing you want to do is be able to train, be able to play, and not being able to do that it's really hard to swallow. And then when you're seeing other players getting signed, that sort of adds a little bit of extra weight to the difficulty that you're already going through. So it's mentally it is the toughest thing I think any professional footballer or player in general in any sport can go through, is when they can't do what they're being paid to do, or what they want to do, or what they love doing.
Coincidentally, I read something today. It was Adriano, the former Brazilian international, and he was talking about his Achilles injury. Yeah. And the quote is, I knew after the surgery I would never be the same player again. And I wondered, was there ever a point through your career where you went, that's
100%. I can remember it. I can remember it like it was yesterday. That point, I can remember it was when they did the gracilis release, and they basically just chopped it away and just let it hang, which I think is, you talk to people again, they would never do that nowadays, but they did it. I can remember turning Jason Wilcox, knocking a ball past me and thinking, this can't be easy. I'm just going to turn. And also I turned to sprint, and there was just nothing. And so it was, that's pretty alarming. That might have been a one-off, but you train the next day, and all of a sudden you realise that the speed and the power that you had it's been taken away from you like that. And so that was hard to swallow, but you quickly have to evolve and change as a player, and play differently, not rely on maybe athleticism. You have to rely on your smarts as a defender. But that was one thing. I was fairly quick early in my career, but after those ops, particularly that was just a game changer. Totally changed who I was as a player.
There must have been some good times when you were fit and healthy, and perhaps you didn't make the field, but you must have been fizzing around at training. I love hearing stories about these guys, Viduka, Kuhl, Lee Bowyer, Rio Ferdinand. Did you see some shit at training that just blew your mind?
Oh, all the time. Robbie Keane, like you think of that team at that time, and they were so young, and it's such a shame that you didn't see them a bit like, and I'm not saying they were exactly at that level, but they were, the great Man U side and that young group of players that were coming through, and Leeds had something very, very similar to that. That's why it was such a shame not to see them stick together and be able to almost create a little bit of a dynasty there. But yeah, man, we used to, the trainings were super intense. I look back and I think, even now as a coach, tactically, what did we do? Well, there wasn't a hell of a lot, to be honest. And that was probably just symptomatic of the times. But it was all about high intensity. And that's why that team, were very successful. It's because they fucking worked so hard on the training field. And that's why I said, like, if you weren't on top of your game, man, it wasn't a good look. But intensity, Olivier Dacour, Ian Hart. I can remember Ian Hart boiling over on a number of occasions. Ian Hart getting an absolute, full boot to the head just about from Olivier Dacour, because it was, I think they were on the same team as well. I think it had all boiled over in a training game, but that was the type of intensity and the environment that you're in. There's a lot of very good players all fighting for a few positions.
You've mentioned the young players that were there. So O'Leary didn't seem to have any hesitation about putting young players in. Has that rubbed off on you now, or is that just kind of a coincidence that that's where your head's at now?
No, without a shadow of a doubt. Look, I saw a group of young players that were, they didn't have the names initially, but they were certainly, given the chance and given that opportunity, were certainly capable of stepping up to the mark. And I think he showed a lot of courage and bravery in giving so many opportunities together at such a young age. And without a shadow of a doubt, look, a big part of the coach I am today, I think, has been influenced by that, but also probably the journey that I've been on, in my coaching journey and the time I spent working with the young players and seeing the type of quality that is starting to emerge and evolve throughout the country now. For me, it's a little bit of a no-brainer.
We can't sort of leave Leeds without talking about Champions League. And
yeah, I was going to say, you had a very unfortunate run personally with injuries, but you were at Leeds in the most incredible seasons perhaps in their club history. They made the semi-finals of the Champions League, and like I said before, I went through a Leeds rabbit hole and I must have watched about 20 minutes of the Barcelona v Leeds at Ellen Road, where Rivaldo, who was at the time the best player in the world, has equalised in the 93rd minute after Lee Bowyer sort of scored the opener for Leeds. But in the leg at the Nou Camp, you made your debut, your Champions League. Was it your Leeds debut? Was
was my full Leeds debut.
Your full Leeds debut at the Nou Camp was at 90,000 people, and you're down 4-0, and you come on in the 90th minute. Yeah.
So how good's that? Like, nothing to lose. Nothing. Like, the game's over. You've been pumped. It was actually our very, very first Champions League game. So, it was a little bit of a rude awakening, I think, for the boys. And what a team to play against. Barcelona, your first Champions League game. So
is it Stoichkov and those guys there still, or is it too early?
No, it was like the De Boer. I'm trying to
Kluivert?
Yep, Patrick Kluivert was up front. It was Alfonso as well.
It's a game of FIFA,
I think Guardiola was there.
Yeah.
So, still a decent side. Certainly wasn't the Barcelona side that was to come, a few years later with Messi and the likes. But man, playing at the Nou Camp, and that was it. It was special for me. Made my debut. Sort of went on there, had nothing to lose. I can remember even David O'Leary when he put me on, just went, just go enjoy yourself.
But before that, obviously you've gone on the field. There must have been a chance that you were going to get on earlier. How were the nerves building up to your potential debut?
Yeah, well, even to be fair, even the training the day before, we got to train on the Nou Camp, and you just, when you're actually at ground level and you're looking up, it's like, holy shit, this is a
long way from Kelston.
Yeah, it is a long way from Kelston. If only those boys could see me now. But even actually, when I went on for Lucas, and he was sort of getting carted off because I think he had a bit of a serious injury. I can remember you could still hear the Leeds fans chanting, because this was for them, just heaven, the Mecca being in the Champions League. But you couldn't actually see them. The stadium was that big, and they were so far up in the they were up in the sky. So beyond the lights, you could hear them but couldn't see them. That's how massive that stadium was. But it was nice to be able to run on that pitch, swap a shirt with a Barcelona player and get that first taste of sort of first team football in a pretty cool sort of environment.
Interestingly enough, we're talking to Jeremy about it. He said he might have lost contact with you a bit over that period, and then he was in a bar watching.
No, he didn't know Danny.
I didn't know Danny at that time, and he turned on the TV, and it was Leeds Barcelona, and he sees Danny Hay coming on in the 90th minute.
His exact words were ginger-haired Danny Hay.
Yeah. But did you get a little bit of press back home? Like, was it kind of celebrated that you actually got to that stage?
Well, I didn't really know back here if there was much. I can remember my mum, though. She must have been listening to Marty Devlin on the radio, and he was going off his nut. Apparently, like, he was losing it, just so excited.
First Kiwi to play in the Champions League.
Yeah, and he was.
Since Winton Roof.
And he was super excited. And I think, I just got it, passed on through my mum that, that he was quite excited that had happened. Yeah. But probably not as excited as me. But it's nice to get that first one off the, sort of tick that off, and then off in racing. I was hoping, but wasn't really to be. But very, very thankful that I could be a part of that. Like you said earlier, that Leeds United side and that club at that time, because it was a special time to be there.
Did you make a habit of kind of playing a big game? Because at Man United, you played against them at Old Trafford as well?
Yeah, so that was my first start. So it was, I was pretty fortunate around some of those experiences that I got. And even then it was...
Who were you up against in that start? Who Man United
so
playing
that was Solskjaer and I want to say...
Teddy Sheringham?
No, memory's gone.
York.
It's Dwight York. Well done. Thank you for that. Hit the ball too many times. it might be the beer. Yeah, so it was those two, and people often ask me who's the best player you've played against, and I think just out of sheer intelligence, Solskjaer was different level. He wasn't the quickest, he wasn't technically the best player, but in terms of intelligence, oh my God. So I can remember David Beckham actually came. We were going okay. It was 0-0, and Roy Keane went off injured. David Beckham came on in the middle of the park and totally changed the game. And I can remember actually even at one point when he sort of drifted into a wide area, and you're thinking Beckham's going to cross the ball because that's what he's world class at. As soon as I turned my head to do that, Solskjaer was off. He wasn't watching Beckham. He was just looking at me. Yeah. So as soon as I turned my head to look over to one side, he was gone off my shoulder, and you're reacting and trying to catch up with him. But special experience that was. Was
that a moment though that you don't want to say you've made it, but you're starting a game at Old Trafford against Manchester United? Is that where your career kind of peaked at that point?
Yeah, I guess so. It was, that was a big game at the time. They were top of the table. I think we were sitting maybe third or fourth, and there was a lot of talk about and a lot of chatter about Leeds and this young group of players that were emerging. And it was the 12 o'clock kickoff, which back in those days there was only the one live game that was aired. And all the other Premier League teams. So if you weren't playing at 12, you were having your lunch, and then you were going to watch the 12 o'clock game for 40 minutes until you got on the team bus and went to the ground. So everybody watched that game, and so it was that game. And I can remember I didn't sleep much the night before. I was rooming with big Mark Viduka, and he was...
What's he like as a character?
He is the loosest cat. He was the loosest cat. So I'm pretty much bricking it because I've got my first start, in a big televised game the next day.
Yeah. So when are you told that you're starting? Is it match day -1?
Yep,
or
match day -1 it was. And so Big Vidukes, he was on the phone, I reckon, till about 2 o'clock in the morning. He's your roommate. Didn't give a shit about me. Just I'll make calls to Croatia. And Aussie. I didn't care. Fuck it, no problems, mate. Yeah, you'll be alright. Don't worry about it. No, good. But I think that was part of what made him special. He was, talk about talented player, but also just really quite nonchalant about, didn't really care either way. And that's why you got either different level out of this world performances or sometimes a bit shit.
Did you play in the game where he scored all four against Liverpool?
Yeah, so I came on after about 10 minutes, something like that, 15 minutes for Jonathan Woodgate. And that was... of all the games all the games I've probably ever played, including international games, that was probably the most special game. To see a performance like that, and the quality of the goals that he scored, and just even the atmosphere at the pitch on the ground that day was something that will always live with me. But what a performance by a big man. I don't think people realise he is a big human being as well. But you watch. Even if you watch those highlights, you watch the way he moves.
Steve probably will after tonight.
Yeah, I think it will.
Yeah, and it's one of probably the few things on YouTube, because my boy found it maybe a year or two ago and was looking. It's all sort of grainy footage and that, but you still see how light he was and how quick on his feet he was and how he could turn on a dime. All of the goals are world class, but the fans in the background, oh man, they are... To put it in perspective, so I was playing next to Dominic Matteo as the other centre half. And I can remember, I think we got back to 3-3, and I'm no more than a metre away from him, and I'm screaming at him about us needing to focus and do our job. He couldn't hear a word I was saying, and it felt like, I don't want to say that whether it was or it wasn't, but it actually felt like the ground was moving, with the fans just going nuts like that, because we were down 2-0, came back, and ultimately obviously won it 4-3. but it was just one of those special things that always live with you.
So you come on after 10 minutes, down 2-0, Big Viduka scores.
We're down 1-0.
1-0.
Down 1-0, and I reckon it was maybe about 5 minutes after I've been on, we go down 2-0. And that's where you want the ground to sort of open up. Again, it was the TV game, so it was the one big game in the, that all the other Premier League teams are watching, and huge derby, because they're big rivals traditionally. Particularly Man U and Leeds, the War of the Roses stuff, and then Leeds and Liverpool was a big game as well at the time. So that's why you're trying to hide almost when you're down 2-0. It's like, oh fuck, here we go. This is going to be one of those days that Leeds fans will always remember, where Liverpool gave you a tonking.
Yeah.
But we stole one just before half time. I remember Alan Smith sort of charged down a clearance from Christian Ziege, and Big Viduka did what he did, and beautiful, I think, little clip into the top corner. But it was really unique walking into the changing room, where we'd essentially been pumped most of the half, and it sort of stolen one at the back end. But the level of belief from that group of players, and playing with no fear, or the thought of playing with no fear in the next 45, like just going for throats. And that was, I guess, the beauty of a young group of players. There was nothing negative around what could happen. It was only a positive. We're going to win this. We're right in this. This is on now. And so that sort of approach and mentality and level of courage, I think, was something that, again, you constantly got to try to remember those little moments and what brought that about.
So incredible win. You've played a big part in it. 25 years old. How do you celebrate? This is a time before social media and cell phones and things. What are you doing? Is the team going out on the piss? A couple in the changing sheds?
Yeah, no, actually, that's funny. Yeah, the old bears in the change room. That never happened once. I don't think we ever had bears in the change room. I think we'd probably move to a slightly more professional level, and that's nothing against teams that do, but it just wasn't the done thing. And I think because it's such a job and a business, heaps of people go, so the aftermatch, when you go and, like say the All Blacks they go into the aftermatch with the opposition and all of that. It's literally, because it's such a job, you don't associate, there's no aftermatch, there's no association with the opposition. You literally just, you finish the game, change room, shower, and you're off on your separate ways. But in a game like that, so back in those days, what did we do? I think that night I actually had Jason Batty. I think he was playing at Grimsby. I think he may have come, and Di and I went out for a meal with him, and then I think she may have gone home, and we went and caught up with a few of the lads. And
Leeds fans must have been going crazy that night, though.
Yeah, but you did. You had it's a great, fun city for a young people. It's a university town, Leeds, and it's a great party atmosphere. And shit, you go and have a good time. Was there
quite a party culture in that young Leeds team at that time, when perhaps professionalism hadn't got to where it is now?
Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt. In terms of you trained super hard, but you played hard off the field as well. And it's not a secret that was probably a big part of the unravelling of that Leeds side with what occurred. And I guess it was a little bit of a habit that players used to go out on a Tuesday night. So you'd train very hard on a Monday, Tuesday, you'd go out Tuesday night, and then you'd have a Wednesday off. So, it was highly documented at the time, but Lee Bowyer and Jonathan Woodgate got themselves into a little bit of trouble. And really that was...
Was that the beginning of the end, really, for that group?
Oh, look, I think...
it was big, right?
Yeah, it was huge. And it went on for the best part of maybe a year and a half, even 2 years. Because I think the jury, the first time around, the guy that got allegedly beaten up by these guys and their mates, the father had written something in one of the papers just before the jury about to give their verdict, and then so they had to get chucked out and they had to go through the whole process again. But it did. It sort of hung over that group.
Does that stress come through the training ground?
I think so, especially when Jonathan Woodgate and Lee Bowyer weren't at training for long periods. So that Champions League campaign, Lee Bowyer was literally in court most of the day, and then would come and play in a Champions League game.
And he was amazing in most of them.
And he was amazing.
Yeah.
Like he was at a different level. It was.
You talk about the fitness stuff.
Yeah.
Was he the fittest?
He was one of the fittest, but just a freak of nature. Like, I can remember his diet was horrific, to say the least. Like horrific, just an appalling diet. But what an incredible athlete! Just a great. He just could keep running. Absolutely, run himself into the ground. One of those sort of box-to-box midfielders. But phenomenal that a guy could be in court, day after day after day, missing training sessions, but then go and perform at the level he did. It was something else. But yeah, that sort of changed. That event changed things, and maybe for the better. But there was something to be said for that group, and being able to, I guess, let their hair down as young men and do it collectively, and 99.9% of the time, without any trouble, doing it in a quite a respectful way. But and that sort of brought the group together. There was a lot of bonding through those sort of Tuesday nights. Yeah. I know that sounds odd, but it did. And I think when that got taken off the table, and then the club was nervous, and then we had security guards with us wherever we went, even on the Christmas party, surrounded by security guys, and yeah, it changed the atmosphere in the club. And I think the players were just a little bit more wary after that, and rightly so.
For you personally, so you signed a 3-year contract, but you'd had 8 groin operations across that time. Was there a point where you knew they weren't going to renew your contract, and so it was kind of just seeing out the clock and then starting to think about what was next?
Yeah, oh look, that final season, I knew that there was very little chance that I'd be re-signed, and I think the way the club was going and the type of money that they were starting to spend and the type of players they were starting to bring in, I think that was the writing was very clearly on the walls for me. And to put that in perspective, I remember even, I sort of intimated it earlier, when I first signed, David O'Leary was, he really went above and beyond to make sure that I knew that they weren't a big club, they're not a big money club. And he even said to me, have a look, how many Ferraris do you see in the car park? And actually I looked, well, none. He goes, that's because we're not a big gun club. But by the time I left, 3 years later, 10 Ferraris in the car park. Yeah. So just, Champions League money and things. And look, and again, it's, it's a well-known story, but the club was financially mismanaged, and they, I guess for want of better words, they gambled a little bit around some of the big purchases in terms of players that they bought. Rio, Robbie Keane, Robbie Fowler, all for big money. And they didn't necessarily have all the rights themselves, all through third-party staff, and then gambling to make the Champions League the second season and not making it. And the club just imploded financially, and it was really sad to see that it's taken them this long till now to get back where they should be, a club of that size. But yeah, to go back to your question, I knew that final year that I needed to try and I had to really work super hard. Not that I wasn't, but I had to really focus in on my body and trying to get that as right as I possibly could.
How many of these guys are you still in touch with?
Very few. I'll put my hand up, and you guys will know because you won't see anything of me on social media. I am useless with that. But I guess the nice thing is with some of them, you come across them again, and it might be, if you're travelling overseas or you bumped us. When you've gone through an experience like that, and when you've shared a change room with a teammate, it's like you saw them 2 days ago. Yeah. You can just straight away. So that's the special thing about football, and I guess any sort of sporting environment where you've gone through shared experiences, both positive and negative. That you've got a constant bond with the guys you've shared a change room with.
Well, before we leave Leeds, you had an opportunity pre-COVID, I think, to go back and see Bielsa at work.
Yeah.
2 things. 1, what was that experience like seeing Leeds back in the big time? And 2, what's Bielsa like on the training pitch?
Yeah, well, first, so they were just prior to those first internationals that I took the All Whites with. So, flew into England early before we went over to the Republic of Ireland, and purposely went and wanted to watch Bielsa work. And I know that Anthony Hudson had spent a lot of time with him, and having obviously worked a little bit with Anthony and seen the detail that he puts in and trying to emulate that, it was good to see, and only obviously just a snapshot in a single day, and seeing just how meticulous he was, the level of detail that had gone into the preparation of the training, and all the coaches knowing their roles. And he had a big staff. Don't get me wrong, there were coaches for Africa, but everything was meticulously set up. Bielsa walked out really quite late in the piece, just before the warm-ups already taken place. Players have been out there for some time, done all their activations, and there were just certain elements that he wanted to see being brought to life, and each coach knew exactly what it was, and it was all timed perfectly. So it was good just to see that detail, and again, just a reminder as a young coach that's trying to develop and evolve, just how much prep needs to go into it. And that's sort of one thing I try to bring into my own coaching, but it was to see it from the best of the best was good. To see how the players respond and their level of professionalism was good. And it was nice actually just to go back to the training ground, and it's a different place to what I remembered it. They've obviously done a fair bit of work there. They built, as you'd imagine with a Premier League club, they built a pretty sensational facility since my time. And I think Bielsa had even put beds in there. So just trying to think of everything. He had a quiet area where the players, knowing that the young guys, they've got young families, young kids. If they're not getting a great night's sleep at home, they could get to the training ground early, have a sleep. If they're doing double sessions, train in the morning, eat, go to sleep, train in the afternoon. So yeah, the level of professionalism and detail that goes into everything, both on the field, off the field, and how they prepare the players and the team was really good to see.
I'm going to cross over into your All Whites career now, and you were part of the team that beat Aussie 1-0 in Brisbane to qualify for the Confeds Cup in Mexico, but then had to miss the tournament after signing with Leeds. Was that Leeds saying you can't go and play in that?
Well, no, it was actually Ken Dugdale, bless him. It was so I've signed for Leeds and gone, right, I've got to get over there and actually try and win a place in the side, or at least just show my face for a little bit. And Ken was adamant that, and he may have a different story to this, but my recollection, and very clear recollection, was that he said, no, you need to come and play against Singapore in a warm-up game to then go over to Mexico. I was like, well, I'll meet you just in Mexico. No, you need to come to Singapore. If you don't, then don't bother coming to Mexico. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I won't come to Mexico then. Because for me it was, and that's one thing that I'm very, very clear on with the players now, is the All Whites is, we're all very passionate about the All Whites, players, fans, coaching staff, but the players need to make sure that their bread and butter, their professional game, their professional club is looked after. They need to have a good career first and foremost. The national team stuff is the icing on the cake for them. And I think to jeopardise that for a player and to jeopardise his career, for me, is not right. And that's why, I had to make a tough decision myself at that time, but that's why I look at it now. The All Whites will be much, much better for having players playing regularly at a high professional level. So we need to make sure that they can cement themselves in their team and get match opportunities first and foremost. Then the All Whites will benefit from that.
You did go to the Confeds Cup in 2003, and at the time you said that some of the All Whites were in France to line their own pockets rather than play for the shirt. Mm-hmm. Is that... Yeah, talk to me about that period.
Yeah, that whole... I think I hadn't played for the All Whites for a while, and that whole experience was incredibly disappointing, if I'm being honest. I think the organisation at the time and just the setup that they had in terms of having I think it was a director of football or a technical director that was, was very clear to us players, wasn't seeing eye to eye with the coach, and the coach sort of being ostracised and isolated. Then you had a group of players that, largely amateur, that had helped qualify the team for the Confeds Cup, and really for them the focus I felt at the time was more around the money that came with that and just the experience as opposed to, fucking winning games for New Zealand, if I'm putting it really bluntly. I felt like too many were happy to just be tourists there and to swap shirts with players to get their fucking shirt, which for me at the time being a pro, and I can remember playing against France and Olivier Decor, he'd been a teammate a year earlier, and so I wanted to beat him. Not just happy to turn up and play there, but I think half the staff and half the players at that time were happy just to take photos of the stadium and take photos of the guys they were just about to play against, rather than wanting to beat them. And I think it was just, for me, it was probably I had a different mentality to that.
Yeah, and you retired soon after that. Then you came back out of retirement.
Yeah, I spat the dummy.
Yeah, that was because of that.
Yeah. And I can remember, so I finished. So my parents had flown over from New Zealand, obviously, and spent a bit of time. My wife had come in from England. My sisters had come over. One of my sisters had a boyfriend over. So people had spent a lot of money. I can remember they came over. They were supporting us. They were loving it. And I can remember finishing that game against France, where we ended up getting pumped. We'd done okay for a while, but ended up just basically throwing in the white towel in the end. And we planned to go on at the end of the Conference Cup like a week's holiday. And I think for about the first 5 or 6 days, I was just an angry, grumpy man. And Jez is right. But this wasn't just on the field this time. I was a nightmare to be around. I can remember even when I first saw him, I flicked my shoes off, I almost hit one of them, and I was just raging at the whole experience. And we'd had a long time together in terms of preparation leading into that Conference Cup. I just felt that we let ourselves down because we had some good players in as well.
Yeah, were other players raging with you?
Ryan Nelson, furious, absolute furious. Simon Elliott, furious with it all. Like really just angry and disappointed about how the whole thing had played out. And so that's essentially why I went, well, why am I doing this? Like, I'm getting so pissed off and taking it out of my family. Well, why? This shouldn't be happening. I should be, every minute playing for your country should be the most special time. That's the one thing that players love about playing for their country. They're getting back together with, doesn't matter whether you're playing at the highest level with your Chris Wood now, or you're Elijah Just, or a young player starting to emerge. The Kiwis, they've got the same values, morals, they've grown up in the same way. So connecting back together, you haven't got guys that have come from completely different walks of life that you will have in your professional environments. So that's why there's little cliques in the professional environment, whereas your national team, that's what you look forward to coming back to. And so, yeah, I had a horrible experience. I wasn't fit either. I was carrying an ankle injury, and that's why I just went, there's no point in me taking it out of my family if I'm going to be like this. So that's why I stepped away. And then, we all know what happened after that. They got beat by Vanuatu over in Adelaide, got smashed. Was it 4-2? And then the All Whites never played for about 18 months, did they, after that?
Yeah, so you retired, but then you answered an SOS from Ricky to come back 2 years later?
Yeah. So
how come you decided to come back?
Well, I'd at that stage, so then I'd finished up at Walsall and decided to come home. And Rick got hold of me before he even got the job. I think Rick and Paul Smalley were sort of fighting it out for who got the All Whites gig, because they had been given this opportunity to play against Australia. Rick got it, and rightly so. And look, he just sat down and just went, yeah, fuck, I was disappointed with how the Confeds Cup played out as well. It's not the way it should be. He goes, I believe that we've got these good young players starting to emerge, the likes of Jeremy Christie, Tim Brown, all these guys. I want to put some pride back in the All White shirt. I'd love it if he came out of retirement. And actually, when he just put it in simple terms and just seeing and hearing the passion that he had for the All White shirt, for me it was a little bit of a no-brainer to get back involved. That's all I ever wanted to see was, a bit of passion for it and desire to put it in a place where it belongs, which is at the highest position possible.
And you carried on. I think the first win on European soil. I think you captained the team to that. Was it Georgia 3-0? 3-1?
3-1. Yeah, I think Cov scored a couple. And Georgia had a couple of big players. They had a guy Kalate who was playing for AC Milan, good player. So yeah, that was a big win. But like I said, that was the start of that journey that ultimately led to 2010 for Ricky. And a lot of those players that he started to blood in and give opportunities to. And to be fair, Graham Cedar, for better or for worse, in terms of financially for the organisation, and he was the CEO at the time, got the All Whites playing.
Yeah, I always feel sorry for Graham because he was 6 months away from being a genius.
That's right. And actually, but Ricky will be the first one to say that if it wasn't for Graham Cedar and his, I guess, pig-headedness to keep investing and believing in the All Whites, they would never have got to where they got to, 2009, 2010, and all the rewards that came with that. But it was a brave move by Graham, and actually a brave move by Ricky to really believe in this group of young players that he was starting to bring through. And I think, again, it was a journey over the course of sort of 4 or 5 years, but it was a bloody good one for me to be a part of initially anyway.
So you came back and you captained the team for the 12 internationals after coming back from retirement. One of them, we'll talk about a few highlights from those. One of them, we're sitting, like I said, in front of the Ronaldo R9, and there's a couple of photos of you, one of you tackling him and one of you sort of slapping hands.
Holding hands.
Yeah, what do you remember of that experience? Was he, I mean, he's a fascinating guy to me. Again, you talk about YouTube rabbit holes.
Yeah, you can get stuck right there. I'll take you right down into 1A with some of the stuff that he did as a young player.
Yeah, what were your experiences marking him, playing against him?
Well, he was, there was a lot of negativity around them at the time. That was that great Brazilian side that was sort of coming to the back end of their cycle, back end of their career. And people were saying, even you can sort of see it in one of the photos, that people were saying that he was carrying too much weight, unfit. And look, that may have been the case to a degree, but my recollection is just, you look at the size of him in the photos, I mean, he's a big human being. And I think that's what a lot of New Zealanders probably don't understand is when you play against those top nations, I'm talking France when they were world champions, Brazil when they were world champions, they're big athletes, big, strong, quick men. And Ronaldo, that was him. And that's why he, you go down the rabbit hole of watching some YouTube clips where, he's playing for Inter and for Barca when he's a young player. And, that's in the days where people were trying to literally cut you in half with tackles and they're coming in from all angles and he's just bouncing off them, basically fending them away, Jonah Lomu style, running over the top of them and then letting his his technique, his skill, his quality and his pace just kill sides. He was a clever player when we played against him, just a proper Brazilian number 9. He didn't do any unnecessary work. He was there to score goals.
I always love imagining the sort of team talks. I guess it would be Mick Waite at this point saying,
It was Rick.
Oh, Rick, sorry, it would be Rick at this point. It's saying, we've got Ronaldo up front, just sort of keep him tight, don't let him keep him on his right,
we like the players that played in that, we sort of laugh about that. So this was the 4th game of that sort of European tour. So we'd played against Hungary and we'd had basically bloody Gulliver's Travels trying to get to Hungary. I think it had been a 48-hour plus maybe 54-hour journey to get to Hungary. And we played a day later and actually played bloody well. Lost 2-0. Then we beat Georgia 3-1. Then we drew with Estonia 1-1. And there was an unbelievable volley goal for our goal. That was one of my few goals. It's still making its way into the net now. It was hit with such little pace. So this was the 4th game. And obviously, like playing against Brazil it was something. But I can remember the tactical approach that Rick had put into place for all the first 3 games. And then he was literally, just go and enjoy yourselves. We're like, oh, hang on, Rick, we're playing against the best team in the world. Nah, just go and enjoy yourselves. And actually, it was smart because he just took the pressure off the players' shoulders and we weren't nervous. But it was just a great experience, it was an absolutely packed stadium, as you can imagine, in Zurich, and every single one of them, bar, believe it or not, I think it was Daniel Vittori in the crowd, was supporting all the Brazilians. But just walking out to that sort of atmosphere against, arguably, the one team that people recognise in terms of international football. So it was a good moment for all those players. Jeremy Christie, David Mulligan, all those guys loved it.
It's from the highs of Brazil, and this tour has been spoken about a few times on this podcast.
Oh yeah,
mentioned by Shea Bunce.
Oh yeah,
mentioned by Roland Jeffrey.
Yep.
I think Chris James was on the tour as well.
Was he?
Might have got that wrong.
No, he probably was. I'm trying to think. I think Jamesy was. Yeah.
And this is
Mully was on it.
Yeah, this is the tour to Costa Rica and Venezuela.
Yeah,
and is that the straw that broke you again
was.
for the national team?
Yeah, 100%. That definitely was. I'm trying to think. So that would have been
March 2007.
Yeah. So wife's pregnant. First child on the way. And then I can remember getting...
Talk about Gulliver's Travels.
Stuck there, yeah. And it was... I think it was just the entire tour. We sort of turned up and we're a bit of a hiding to nothing to play against Costa Rica and Venezuela and in their neck of the woods, with their referees. And you just got... We didn't have the strongest side and we just got absolutely rolled. And so it wasn't...
One of them was a horrendous pitch as well. It was a plastic pitch.
Plastic, like in Costa Rica, it was probably the worst pitch. People talk about Bill McKinley as a plastic pitch being a baddie, but this was, you're taking it, times Bill McKinley by about 30 or 40, and you're getting somewhere close. And then you're not getting helped by the local referees. They're totally against you. Then Venezuela, we get absolutely pumped there. You roll into you sort of drag yourself to the airport the next morning, and classic New Zealand football at the time, they'd said, okay, well we'll pay for our team to get out to Costa Rica, Venezuela. You guys fly us home. Oh yeah, no problems. We'll get that all sorted. We've got your backs. I think it was probably about 36 hours of lying on the floor of the airport in some little Shitsville place, and I hope there's no Venezuelans that take offense to that.
You've got a huge Venezuelan audience, actually. Just be very careful with your words, please, Danny.
Matt, but it was, this airport was not the most pleasant place. A rat-infested hole is probably a nice way of describing it. So I think we must have been there like a day and a half, just lying, waiting for them to organise a flight for us. And of course they never did. We somehow made our way back to Caracas, and another sort of 3 or 4
the game wasn't even in Caracas.
No. We were in, that's on me, Maracaibo. We were in Maracaibo, which, if you look at, remember, again, there was no real stuff online, but we got the old Lonely Planet and wondered why that when we arrived in Maracaibo that they had almost like the local SWAT police driving us to the airport, because you read about it and they go, whatever you do not drive from the airport into the city by yourself. You're going to get mugged. So you had these guys with, the AK-47s hanging out of the arm around the inside of the truck and sort of hanging out, ready to shoot whoever came near us.
And I've been on those tours. You can talk about it in jest now.
Yeah.
But at the time, you're shitting yourself, aren't you?
Oh, yeah.
Because you're miles away from home.
Yeah.
You've never seen a gun in your life.
No.
And these guys are like proper bulletproof masks on, so no one can see their identity. It's scary stuff.
It is. Especially coming from a country like we do, where it's just we take so much stuff for granted in terms of our freedoms and our safety. But I was me, Rick, and maybe Roland Jeffrey. I want to say Stu Jacobs. We were the last cabs off the rank to sort of get out, and we finally got out of Caracas after about 3 attempts. I remember going to the airport each morning, and you're almost on a standby, and then you want to say that they didn't do it on purpose, but I'm pretty sure they did it on purpose. They can screw the Kiwis, they can wait. And so we just had to keep going back to the hotel. Couldn't even have a beer for whatever reason. I think it was some religious thing. So we were sort of stuck there in this dry hotel for day after day. Eventually got to...
What grief are you getting from the Home Office?
Oh, yeah. Actually, that was the beauty of no mobile phones. Eh? So
there you go. Had you made the decision on one of those failed trips to the airport that you were done? Like, did you retire in the airport sort of thing?
A little bit. I remember, I'd sort of lost my head a little bit about it. And I think it was the entire experience. I think, you're going over there, you're a little bit of a hiding to nothing. And then you go through that at the end. And just knowing that I was physically at the end as well. And I knew that. And I'd sort of let my body get to a point that, I look back now, I'm not proud of. Like, I wasn't in peak condition like I should have been. It's quite sad. I probably think I'm in better shape now than I was back then.
You're in great nick, by the way. I mean,
he's right.
No, but that's the sad reality. Like, there I was playing for my country, and I hadn't long finished being a pro, and I was turning up, and I think it's just because I know more about my body and know more about nutrition now than I probably did back then, or take more notice of it now. So it was, I think all of that just culminated to the point that I knew I was done. Family on the way, body not great, couldn't play the way I knew I used to be able to, which is what happens to everybody when they get a little bit older. And I think the big part was knowing that I think my role in that team I'd sort of ticked that off. We now had sort of bled these younger players in. You knew that people like Ryan Nelson were killing it in the Premier League, Simon Elliott, that, in the next couple of years they were going to be fine. That they didn't need any more help or mentoring anymore.
It's an interesting one in terms of an international journey, because it's kind of like a 4-year cycle, right?
Yeah.
And you were almost right in the middle of those two World Cups, and you've got to make a call about, okay, I can either hang on and I'll be 34 maybe at the World Cup,
so
35.
which wouldn't have been that old.
Yeah. Or
Yeah.
cut my losses and let that group go.
Yeah. And I look, I guess when I got to South Africa to support the players, you sort of in the back of your mind, you're a little bit like, fuck, I wish I'd held on, because you look at them out there and doing it against, Italy and Slovakian lights, and you're going, I still could have been a part of that. But actually, really, I didn't have any real regrets. I knew that my time was up. And I was going on a different journey. I'd started working at Sacred Heart, and we're starting to build a little bit of a program there, and I was enthused and excited about that. And I think I just lost that little bit of an edge and passion for actually playing.
So what were you in South Africa? Did you go as a fan? Did you have?
So I went as the.
You leading a tour group or something like that?
I was the House of Travel sort of, not tour leader, but ambassador type, and
Liaison.
Actually I was, there's probably some guys listening to this, and they will agree, hands down, I was the worst, like that worst tour leader or ambassador or whatever you want to call it, just simply because I was at the back of the bus on these long bus journeys, because we're staying in, not Joburg, but it's not Durban, where did the boys play?
Rustenburg.
Yeah, so they're at Rustenburg, but where's Loftus? Loftus, the stadium.
That's in Pretoria.
Pretoria. So we're staying in Pretoria. There you go. You know South Africa.
This guy. That's why we keep you around.
Yeah. You're gonna have to. I'm gonna have to hold now.
Geography guy.
Yeah, but I was a disgrace. Honestly, that's what it boiled down to. We were having a very good time in the back of the bus, and an even better time at the games because the lads were going so well. That probably the poor families that paid to go on that trip, probably got every right to come and sue me now. When they look back on it and go, he was the worst. Yeah, I was a shocker. But I had the time of my life.
Because in my notes, and I haven't written these in my notes, so I don't know the story. It says, ask him about the time he took his shirt off in the stands against Italy and then kissed Ricky's ring.
Yeah. That's.
I can see the discomfort as you recall this.
It's not my finest moment, honestly. But that just shows not being used to being a football fan. So the Phoenix were up and running at the time. The last 10 minutes, the shirts. So when we were up, when we've scored, I couldn't believe it. We've scored against Italy, and the game's going on, and we're in the game, and I can't remember at some point that the shirts were off, and I got mine, and just honestly so useless at it. I think about 4 twirls and the thing went out of my hand, and it's a packed stadium, and I didn't know which direction it had gone, so I'm looking around. And so I had to stand for the rest of the game with no shirt on.
Middle of winter too in South Africa.
Yeah, no shirt on. And I can remember we're standing there clapping the boys as they've got the draw against Italy. And I can remember walking around and Tim Brown looking at me, pointing, going, what a disgrace. Having that body on show.
I hope the rig wasn't decent back then.
So what was the third game? That's Paraguay.
Yeah.
So that was when. So, they all came around afterwards, and I think I had probably enjoyed the journey up to the stadium a little bit too much and was caught up in the moment, and gave Rick Spring a little bit of a kiss, like, you magician. Get in there, you little beaut.
Rewind 1 year, the Bahrain game.
Yeah.
Are you in the stadium for that one as well?
Yeah. So I can remember I got down there early into the live cross, I think, with Andrew Gordy for TV3 on the pitch, and I can remember the players. And that was one thing that was just so evident at the time. I knew we had a really good chance, if not, I knew 100% going to win, was seeing the Bahrain guys come out on the pitch, and they looked like they wanted to be anywhere other than a good old Wellington, windy, freezing cold evening. They wanted to dig a hole or go back to their hotel beds and tuck themselves in. They're all huddling up and rubbing their hands together, and I thought, far out, we're on here. And sure enough, wow, I still don't think there's been, and I'm happy to be proved wrong, but I don't think, even with some of those great nights that we've had, with cricket and everything, that we've had a better atmosphere, better crowd, better moment in the game in any sport in this country.
Sure. I just want to close the lid on the playing stuff, and then we're going to move on to the coaching. One of my favourite things to ask people is, did you fulfil your potential in your career? I already know the answer with you because of your injuries. You didn't reach what you could have been. But when you look back on your career now, are you looking back with frustration? Are you looking back with pride at what you achieved? Or what do you think of it when you reflect?
Yeah, look, that's a great question. I know some mates and some guys that I played with, even national team players, that are still, I think, are a little bit bitter that they probably didn't get to fulfill what they thought they were capable of. And yeah, I've got a little, like, there's obvious frustrations around the injuries and what could have been, but actually I'm just super thankful and grateful that I got to experience some of the things that I did. And I think that's what drives me largely to want to see our young Kiwi players experience the same things and ultimately experience them at an even better level. So I'm hugely grateful for all the experiences I had. I really have no regrets around it. Yeah, a little bit of frustration that my body let me down, but that's part and parcel of being a professional athlete, eh?
I've noted two names down, which kind of read as a career highlight: Ronaldo and Thierry Henry. The opportunity to play against those guys is something that you could probably look back on with fondness. Not to mention the Nou Camp, the Old Trafford, the Liverpool game. Like, there's some reasonable milestones.
Yeah, that's right. Some good memories, and it's not until you really finish. When you're in the moment, you just sort of take it for granted, and you don't really think about it. But I guess it's now, if you look back, and of course it's not something you talk about. Like I said to you guys earlier, my 12-year-old daughter doesn't even know the teams that I played for in England. So it's not something you talk about on a regular basis, but every now and then you might catch a clip of something, or there's somebody's brought up a highlight, and it just will take you back to that moment. And they're special moments that you literally, nobody can take away from you, and you don't want to change. So that's why I say I'm very grateful for every experience that I had.
Let's talk coaching. You're the All Whites coach. You got the big job. You played
big job.
The biggest of the jobs. So I'm going to steal Shay's question here. You played for 5 All Whites coaches in your career: Keith Pritchett, Joe McGrath, Ken Dugdale, Mick Waite, and Ricky Herbert.
Yeah.
How are you different?
Yeah, that's a great question.
You're welcome.
Yeah, it is. That's a beaut though. First and foremost, the game has changed, and so I'm a different coach because I'm working in a different era with a different type of player. And I think that's the big aspect. I look back at myself as a player, and now I look at the players that I'm working with, and they're technically a different type of player. Their mental approach is different. We didn't used to question coaches. It was more of a dictatorship. You just got on and did what you were told to do. Whereas nowadays, you encourage the players to question things, to have feedback, to self-evaluate, to learn, and you really want to try and foster that. So, yeah, vastly different coach to probably what I experienced in my time at the All Whites.
I've canvassed a few coaches, and one of the questions that's come out is what prompted the shift in philosophy from your time under Hudson to your current approach. And I sort of pushed back and said, well, what are you defining as these philosophies? So I'm going to read out what they've said, and then you tell me if you agree with it, and if not, why not? So they're saying Hudson was pragmatic. He was a realist. It was after short-term results. He wanted to maximise what he had, disrupt the opponent. Where Danny Hay is progressive. He's romantic. He likes to outplay the opponent regardless. Heavily position-based. Don't compromise your values for anyone. Do you think that's fair?
To a degree, probably not as romantic as some people think. Look, I think the evaluation of Anthony was absolutely bang on, and even when I took the 17s, under his watch, I recognised that he was the boss, and he had a particular way of playing, a particular way that he wanted the teams to play. And so, being a team player, I tried to stick to that as much as I possibly could, but also tried to influence things in the way that I saw that we could play. In terms of the evaluation about how I want to see things done, look, I just think we've got a type of player now that is technically far more proficient to what we've ever had in the past. They want to play with the ball. They don't want to just run around and defend the entire time. They're very capable of maintaining possession. And of course, that's relative to the opposition you come up against. Yes, we want to outpossess teams if we possibly can, but when you're going to come up against some of the very best sides in the world, that's not always going to be possible. So we're going to have to be pragmatic at times. There's no doubt about that. And I think, you look at my nature and the position I played and me historically, the rock that the castle was built on is how you defend. And so we need to make sure that that's going to be our foundation first and foremost. We're lucky at this point in time that we've got some real experience in those sort of areas that can start to dictate that. That's the whole team doing it. But I think we can play a different style of football to what we have in the past.
How would Danny Hay, the defender, the professional footballer, have responded to this progressive approach?
Look, I think I would have loved it. If I look at it, if an All Whites coach had come to me as a player and said, actually, you know what, how you've basically been told, without being told, this is, it's not that any coach in my time in the All Whites actually said, hey, you guys are a bit shit. You're not actually good enough to try and maintain possession and break sides down through, incisive possession-based football. So that's why for me, I said to the players, and I did it even before I got the job. I spoke to a few of those players and said, this is what I believe in. This is what I think you're capable of. What do you think? And they were all like, fuck yeah. I think they've just been crying out for somebody to have a little bit of belief in them. To go, I think we can do things differently. The old adage, do what you've always done, get what you've always got. And to be honest, apart from 82 and 2010, what have we got? So why not try and do things a little bit differently? So, to answer the question, if somebody had said it to me when I was playing, I would have gone, do we have the players to do that? Okay, if we do, then let's have a crack. Why not? What do we got to lose?
So since your appointment, the All Whites have only played twice. What do you do? What do you do to fill your days?
What do I do? I get square eyes looking at our players, and I say our players because people that are passionate about the game want to know how our players are going. So I'm watching our players, and that's the beauty of modern technology, is that with Scout, huddle instant. Doesn't matter where they are or who they are. I can pretty much watch them and get a really good idea of how they're performing, and then, you know, we're trying to connect with them as much as possible, and that's that for me has been a real learning, a real juggling act around who you contact and how many times you contact them. So somebody like Woodsy, you know, with the level that he's playing, it clearly doesn't want me calling him each week and going, hey, how are things going? Are you all right? But, you know, some of the younger players, maybe a touch base with them a little bit more, and maybe give them a little bit of feedback. And you've got to remember, there's, you know, we've got the best part of sort of 55, 60 players playing overseas now. And a lot of those are young players that are just making their way, just starting their journey. And they've gone through a pretty tough time. You know, not only have they gone over to Europe, for instance, but they've gone over there and now you've had COVID hit. And so that level of isolation for them, you know, has sort of been magnified. So it's very, very difficult for some of them mentally. And we're just trying to make sure that they're coping well, that they know that there's some support back here. So then we've done group Zooms. And, you know, I sort of spoke about it earlier that we've had the likes of Ryan Nelson come on. And, man, that was, you know, you don't want to use the word powerful, but it was incredibly powerful. That
Could you let him know to come on the podcast?
Yeah, next time you're speaking with Ryan, say, because he's agreed to come on, but he's gone a bit quiet. So yeah, next time you're talking to him.
He would be unbelievable on this because some of the experiences he's had. But, you know, he's a humble, honest, open guy, and I think that came through in bucket loads to the players. And one of our identity values is be Kiwi, and the reason we have that, and I've never said this publicly because we've tried to keep them special and unique to us, but I think it's good for people to know that, you know, that whole idea of being Kiwi, you know, remembering who you are, yes, staying humble, but, you know, fighting, trying to win, just as our whakapapa did, you know, is something that we've got to connect back to. We've got all our players scattered around the world, and some of the players have been outside in New Zealand for longer than they actually were inside. And they've probably lost that Kiwiness and that connection. And that's through no fault of their own. But so it's just trying to drag them back to remembering who we are, where we come from, what we're about. And I think Ryan was an unbelievable example for them of that.
You've touched earlier on managing some of our higher profile players, and I think that's a really interesting one, having been involved in and around national teams before with the campaign for Brazil, I think it was, when Tommy Smith was at Ipswich, and it was just before the Intercontinental Playoff with Mexico, and can he come late, can he not come late? The really difficult conversations to have.
Yeah.
And the public don't always understand. I mean, you've been through it as a player yourself. And the public don't always understand. It's not just as easy as clicking your fingers and getting through that. So how have you navigated, or how do you navigate some of those conversations and managing agendas?
Well, I'm doing it now around the Olympics. So this is a real big one because it's not an official FIFA window. So ultimately, every single player via their club, you know, and it's going to be their club, the clubs can turn around and go, no, we're not releasing them. No, you're not going to the Olympics. We want you to stay here and either go through pre-season or stay in the league and keep playing games. So for me, it's been massively. And you talk about, you know, what I spend my time doing. You know, it's building relationships with the clubs. First and foremost, building relationships with the players, and you know, I've sort of spoken about that briefly, and just making sure that they know that we're here to support them. But yeah, trying to touch base with the clubs. You know, it's a little bit of, you know, I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine. So that was why after that first game against the Republic of Ireland, I purposely let Woodsy, Winston, Ryan Thomas go back and not need to come to Lithuania, because it was a little bit of give and take. And
so how do you manage that internally with the squad as well?
I'm very open and honest with them. And, you know, we've got to say this is the reason why I'm releasing them, because further down the track, could be Intercontinental Playoff, it could be the Olympics, it could be World Cup. We're going to need to have relationships with some of these clubs. And look, I'd planned just prior to COVID last year with, you know, and we had so many players playing in the MLS. Winston's obviously gone back to the UK, but I'd planned to go around and spend 3 or 4 days with all those key clubs that we've got players at, to build relationships for the now, but also for the future, to try and hopefully open doors for some of our younger players that are starting to come through, where we could give them opportunities. But yeah, it's like anything in life. It's just, it's starting to build relationships with them, getting a good connection, getting a really good understanding of why they wouldn't want to release a player, and then just talking through that process. And so going through that now.
And then how frustrating is that when either the player then moves club or a manager gets sacked and you've put all this graft in,
Yeah.
and then you've got to start from scratch again?
Well, I think that's just the nature of the job, and you've got to sort of come in with your eyes open. But, the key thing for me, and I guess it goes back to the question you just asked about, some of our players in the past have not always made themselves available. And for me, the number one thing is to try and create an environment that they desperately want to be a part of. And I think that's been the big thing that I've seen missing probably over the last couple of coaches, and that's nothing against them. It's just that I don't think they have a really good grasp around, or have had a really good grasp around us as a nation, how we grow up, our mentality, the culture that makes us unique and very, very different. And I think they've tried to implant something from another part of the world in onto us. And that's why I don't think the players have necessarily loved that environment, desperately wanted to be a part of it. And so for me, that's a big, big part of it, is try and create a place that they just can't wait to come back into. They're dying each window. Can we get games? Yep, hand up. I want to be a part of it. And so far, even though we've only had that one window we've played games, we've had, a couple that have been on the table and it was looking like we were going to go. And even with the Olympics as well, everybody desperately wants to be a part of it. So that's so far so good in that regard.
Danny, you've never been afraid to voice your opinion publicly.
Mm-hmm.
You were highly critical of Ricky Herbert and New Zealand football after the 2012 OFC Nations Cup in the Solomon Islands. How would you react to similar criticism from a former player now that you're a coach?
Yeah, like it was for Rick, it'd be tough to swallow. And I guess I would first and foremost take a good long look in the mirror and see if there was any truth to it. If there were certain aspects that have been pointed out and why this would be getting said, then I'd have to have a look. It'd be hard to swallow, and you probably want to fire up straight away. But it's like anything. If something doesn't go to plan, the first place to look is in the mirror when you're brushing your teeth at night, and then hopefully try and find some answers there before you start pointing the finger in other directions. But yeah, look, even back then, and that was probably is it something that I look back on a little bit of regret? Yeah, probably the way I went about that was regretful, but that was my job at the time with a column in the Sunday Star Times, and that was part of my gig, was just telling it how I saw it. But yeah, would I be disappointed? Probably, but at the same time, I'd be looking into seeing if there was any validity to what's being said.
Talking of planning, what does the next year look like? Shay and I were talking about this on the drive up. It's, the World Cup is next year. There's been no qualifiers yet. We're thinking, Shay knows all this inside stuff here. He's thinking it's January and there's got to be a tournament. Now, if it's a tournament in New Zealand, sure, we can handle that. If it's a tournament in the islands, that could be very tough. There could be some very high stakes games, one-off semis, one-off finals, in very difficult conditions. Is that a scary thought?
And knowing that in 2012 in the Solomons...
Yeah. So you're saying that I could be getting the ex-player coming out and going?
but also you look at global football, getting players released for that amount of time potentially.
Look, to go to the first part of the question, what does it look like? Well, we don't know. Is the honest, simple answer. Like, who knows at this stage, because we just don't know. We're doing all this planning and prep for the Olympics, but there's still a slight chance that could be pulled, and that's still very much the case with World Cup qualifying. It's been pushed back a couple of times now. There's talk that it could be January, February, and it would have to be a tournament-based qualifying, and that is in itself, that would be tough, because you're coming down to like I say, a one-off semi, a one-off final, and we know And we all know, people that have been involved in the game at a decent level, how difficult it is to play against the island nations now. They're not the easy beats that they once were in the 80s. They're very organised. They've got good coaches, good facilities. They're technically, very difficult and unpredictable to play against. They're good. They're very good. So does that concern me? 100%. That it would come down to a one-off tournament. But at the same time, then I've got to look at the quality that we have and the type of players we have and the depth that we have, which I think probably answers that question. If we, for whatever reason, can't bring back a Chris Wood because he's in the middle of a Premier League season, then we just have to back that, we've got players that are capable of stepping into that hole.
It leads nicely into kind of your Waitakere United days and the Champions League and stuff. Playing those home and away matches versus the tournaments. Like the home and away matches present challenges within themselves, but the tournaments, keeping that group together for that amount of time as well is difficult, right?
So difficult. Look, the tournaments hosted in the islands, and I've done it with the 17s, and you've seen multiple New Zealand teams, and that 2012 horror in Honiara is a prime example of you're not just coming up against good quality sides, but you're coming up against conditions that you're not used to. The level of humidity, the heat, the drinking water. You just got to be so careful. You're taking malaria tablets all the time. You're worried about things that you're not normally worried about, and all of that probably takes its toll. So there's such a difficult place to play. But to sort of put it in perspective, I think back to those Waitakere days. We went to Honiara.
Did you play in that game?
Yeah. No. I was sitting on the side. Yeah. Remember, we'd played the final of the National League a week before, 2 weeks before, and I'd chipped a bone in my ankle. So tried to get out there and couldn't play. Yeah. Did a little fitness test the day before. There was no way I was playing, but sat on the sideline. And I can remember I have never been more uncomfortable in my entire life, just with the heat and humidity.
We were both there.
Yeah, I can remember. Yeah.
So, and remember all the Solomon Islanders sitting on the shed, which fell
the roof
apart
collapsed
during the game, and then they're just all shrieking.
Yeah.
It's like, holy shit, what's just happened? And then just like howls of laughter. And then it was play on.
But thousands and thousands of fans there, but in the middle of the day, and just do you remember Neil Emblem? I've never seen a human being look like they were actually going to die.
He said that on his episode.
It looked like he looked like I've never seen a person go grey. That sort of like you're dead grey, but he was still somehow running around, and I can remember being on the sideline and never feeling as uncomfortable as as I ever have. And then watching those guys, I remember Darren Baisley slapping Jason Hayne in the face because Jason Hayne cut inside as the right winger and expected Darren Baisley to do an overlapping run in 40 degrees and 100% humidity, and then they had an argument, and Baisley's like, "You silly so and so, what do you think I'm going to do in this heat?" and gave him a little clip around the head, and that's when things are falling. When you know that you got Benjamin Tattori and Commons Manapi, the two Solomon Islanders, putting their hands up to get taken off.
That's what everyone was most disappointed at. He's like, "This is your backyard."
It was a disgrace, but it just sort of sums up the difference to playing in the island. So we get pumped 3-1. It probably could have and should have been more than that. To then turning around a week later. It was a week later.
Yeah.
Was it 6-0, 7-0 we beat them?
Yeah.
And I injected my ankle and played in there, and it was a nice cold West Auckland day in July or something like that. It was horrible. And we absolutely battered them. Yeah. But that's the difference. It's that much of a turnaround. What are we talking, like a 10-goal turnaround or something? It's crazy.
Real quick interlude, and you've opened a door to ask a question which I wasn't sure about. You mentioned Darren Baisley slapping Jason Rowley.
Oh, was it Jason Rowley? I thought it was Jason Hayne.
Sorry.
Jason
You said Rowley. So
did I say Rowley?
Yeah,
sorry, it's Haney.
I think he said Hayne.
Yeah.
You've had too many beers, mate.
No, it's definitely Rowley.
We'll check the tape. Anyway, he said Hayne.
How much? I'm going for another 6 beers that I said Hayne. Yeah.
Just a few more things from me. I know we kept you late on a school night, but we're loving this. One of the most popular guests from the football audience in Between Two Beers is Declan Edge. So tell us, what was the working relationship like with Declan, and will we ever see him involved in an All Whites camp?
Yeah, again, great question. Look, I absolutely loved spending time with Declan, and I still do now, because he thinks very differently to the way most football people, not just in New Zealand but worldwide, do. And you look at the approach he's taken and the work he's done, particularly in Hamilton and then down in Ole, and the results he's had. You can't turn a blind eye to that. He's certainly got some very, very good ideas, and like I said initially, some of these ideas will challenge you and challenge your thinking. And I've got no doubt when he did this, he would have probably brought up some things that people would go, holy heck, what is he talking about? But actually, I like it because for me, it takes me out of my comfort zone and gets me thinking about things that I probably wouldn't otherwise think about. And going back to the relationship and the working relationship that we had at Eastern Suburbs. So that just came about because I'd seen the year before a whole heap of very, very good players based down at Ole not playing in the National League, and that for me was just a travesty. And having worked with a number of them in the under-17s environment just didn't make any sense to me. So I spoke to Declan and said, look, I'd love to bring them up. I think they need to be playing in the National League. He agreed, but he was very adamant that he had a particular way of doing things and that he needed to show me what that looked like. And that's for me where I was very, very happy and no ego. You got to try and drop your ego at times. But I let him come in for the first, I think it was 5 weeks, we agreed. And he really drove that first bit of pre-season in the environment, and it was good. It was good for me to look at the way he worked with the players, to pick up a few little pointers, tips, and also have some ideas about where I thought we could improve things as well. And so, Declan and I got on great. We had a couple little moments, as you would expect, but by and large, it was great, and that's why I still get on great with him now.
How highly does that National League title rate in your achievements?
Oh, look, I think very, because you've got to look at the National League prior to that, and it was dominated by sides that had a lot of foreign players in there. And that probably in those more recent years to us winning that, and or older, more established Kiwis, and that was where and I'd been very open about it even the season before, where I played a lot of young up and coming New Zealanders, and for me it was just almost proving a point that if we actually give these young players a platform, if we show that we believe in them, that they're actually capable of stepping up and doing pretty amazing things. And I think the way they played at times, some of the football they played was entertaining. It was bloody entertaining. I think people loved watching it. The possession based, they wanted to score goals, they wanted to entertain, and I think they did that.
Awesome.
How's our list looking, Shay? Mine is all done. We are good.
Well, I think it's an interesting segue into the changes to the National League that have just happened.
Oh yeah.
And I was interested in two things: comparing when you played to when you coached to where we are now.
Yeah.
That gradual transition over 30 years.
Yeah, and it is. It's when I first went in there, it was the Super League, so probably a little bit more similar to what we've got now. And I know a lot of people have said, it's a step back in time. We tried it then and it didn't quite work, but I think we're in a different environment now. I think for starters, the National League, as we knew it, had run its course. I don't think the franchise model, and I know why the franchise model was set up, but I don't think in this day and age it actually was working, because it wasn't providing a pathway for the young players. So for instance, my boy, let's use my boy as an example, as a 13-year-old, how did he get to play for Waitakere United, who I play for? I want to follow my dad's footsteps. Well, I couldn't even tell him what the pathway into that Waitakere United side was. Whereas you go to a club-based model and he can see it the minute he walks into Eastern Suburbs. Oh, I see now, okay, so I've got to play for the 14s, 15s, 17s. Then hopefully I can work my way into the top level of the game in this country. So the franchise model for me had sort of run its course, and that's why I think it was a great decision. It was brave by New Zealand football to sort of really go club-based. And I think the other thing was needing to go to one season. We were the only country in the world that was having this sort of 2-season mixed model where players were playing 12 months of the year, and I just don't think, I don't think that was fair on them. So now to have a proper off-season and to reset and go again, I think is going to be good. Is the league going to need to be tweaked? I think 100%. I think it's going to be sort of a work in progress, but hopefully we're going to get to a place whereby, we've got to remember we're in a unique position because it's an amateur league working with amateur players, so therefore it should be about development in my eyes, first and foremost, because of those two factors. So hopefully we're going to be in a position now where we're seeing lots of young players getting opportunities. You're going to watch them evolve, develop, and hopefully step onto the next part of their journey. Phoenix, A-League, Europe, whatever that may be.
How has the 2 under-20 players rule that has to start every game been received? I've seen some people being quite outspoken about it, but has there been a general consensus on feedback from the clubs?
Yeah, look, I think initially, it's like anything, change. People don't like change, they're a little bit fearful about it, but people have worked with it, and I think now that it's just part and parcel, they're getting on with it, and you look at the numbers of young players that are getting opportunities in the mandated leagues compared to the ones that aren't. It's quite a stark difference. And what we're actually finding is that by and large, most teams are not just starting the 2, they're starting more than that, because I think they've gone, well, hang on a minute, we've actually got some good young players starting to emerge now, and you're starting to provide a pathway for them. So it's going to encourage more to get involved in the game. They can see a valid way through. So, yeah, I think there was some opposition, but people have got on with it, and I think people are now starting to see the benefit. And I think long term, which ultimately it's about me, it's, in my eyes, is about future-proofing the national teams and the All Whites in particular. So probably me as the national team coach at the moment, I won't see the benefits of it, but hopefully the coach after me does. That there's, you're going to look back and go, well, holy heck, look at all these now All Whites that made their debut in the National League system at a really young age and got multiple minutes and playing minutes under their belt.
You'll see the benefits of it if you stay in the gig for 10 years, Danny. So,
last question from me, and it's from the Obscure Image Files.
Yeah.
How much, and was it you playing a game in the National League with the old black paint under the eyes?
Yes, it was.
And why?
Yeah, that's another one of those ones you go, what was I doing? So that was Chatham Cup final, would have been 95, something like that. So, maybe 94, 95. First year out of high school, got into Waitakere City, and they were a super strong side. We made the final against Wellington Olympic, and we had this Canadian physio. Oh, you guys are playing in lights, and because no football teams played in lights back in those. We never had night games. It was all day games. Oh, you've got to wear that, or you'll get the reflection in your eyes. Oh, is that right? Okay. Well,
is that the one and only time you ever worn the commando paint?
Yeah. But it's funny. So I think there was a few of us. There was Steve Kane as well, and he was the captain. I thought, if the captain's doing it, I'm definitely doing it. I'm getting that stuff on there, and how cool is that? You look back at some of those photos now, you go, holy heck, what was I thinking? But quite funny. Quite funny.
That's been awesome, Danny. Thanks so much for giving us your time. Covered a lot of ground there, but I'm sure everyone listening will have really enjoyed it. Shay, last words?
No, excellent. As a football tragic, just to hear some of the names, to know the time period that you played in, being involved closely, not closely, with some of those games that you played in as well, and kind of hearing those insights has been excellent. So thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for making the journey up. It's been good. Enjoyed it.
Have to do it again sometime.
Yeah.
Cheers, Danny.
Cool.
Hey guys, thanks for listening. If you've made it to the end, hopefully that means you've enjoyed the ep. If that's the case and you feel strongly enough about it to share on social media, we'd greatly appreciate it. It's the quickest and easiest way to help the podcast grow. Thanks for tuning in.